a special kind of IEM, the latest release from Hidizs My Lin. Okay, I have a disclosure or disclaimer to make. Honestly, I am not a fan of waifu or anime or anything like this, and this is not exactly my kind of thing, but I'm just gonna put aside my personal taste and my preference because this is not about me, this is about reviewing this My Lin as an IEM. And talking about the packaging itself, okay, My Lin has just been recently released. In fact, it is now available through Hidizs website and priced at $89 and it is a hybrid, which I will talk a bit more after this. So let's just quickly have a look. For the price of $89, what you're gonna get. This is the box itself. Let me just quickly show to you. And the back here, some details, specification and everything. And of course, this is the kind of thing which is meant for Gen Z perhaps. Okay, like I say. And I have already taken out the IEM, of course, obviously, because I've been using it. But I like to show some of the things that is included with this My Lin. It comes with these two type of ear tip, bass ear tips and balanced ear tip. Both of them, this one actually seems to be thicker and with smaller nozzle bore, and this is also on the smallish side. But this one has a denser body to it, which is why it emphasizes a bit more on lower frequency. And in fact, you would notice that I am already using it because I like it a bit more because it does not emphasize too much on the upper frequency. And the most interesting part is that it also comes with 3 type of tuning nozzle here. Okay, at which pretty much very similar to Hidizs MP145 Pro or some other Hidizs IEM. And these tuning nozzle are just simply designated as high, balance and low. And pretty much very straightforward. High means that emphasis on the higher frequency, low meaning emphasis on lower frequency, and balance being somewhere in between. And this is where it gets interesting because I believe this My Lin is pretty much intended for the younger generation, the Asian-based generation, which love this kind of presentation or this kind of stuff, like this My Lin plate here, which you can install. This is the stand, by the way, like this. Okay, let me just attach this. Okay, but the whole idea is that it look like this. Okay, you see that? And just gonna put it back. On top of it, you also get this cleaning cloth here, which is again My Lin here, the character herself, and some stickers and a carrying pouch. Okay, that's it. For the price of $89, especially if you are an anime fan, this is definitely very value added for the whole packaging. Now, let's just have a closer look at the IEM itself, okay, which is already attached here. It comes only with this simple termination, permanent termination of either 4.4 mm balance or 3.5 mm single-ended. So let's just quickly have a look at the cable itself. It employs this twist braid kind of thing, which is kind of a bit on the hefty side, but at least it does not feel stiff and it doesn't seem to be tangling easily. So this thing resists tangling, which is an impressive thing, and it has this chin slider here as well. And it has a very special kind of 2-pin connection, which this is the first time that I'm seeing it like this, transparent and yet, angle like this. If you're familiar with Hidizs, then by now you should also know that Hidizs is a specialist when it comes to construction of metal shell IEM. It is chrome plated. I don't exactly know what is the material, but I believe this is some sort of CNC machine, nickel perhaps. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, detachable tuning nozzle, which you can easily detach like this. There. And inside, you're going to find a hybrid of 2 drivers, which are one dynamic driver and one balance amateur. And the weight, let's just find out what kind of weight are we looking at. 13 gram which is pretty much to be expected of a metal shell IEM. So let's just get this thing assembled. Just gonna get the cable back again. Attaching it very easy. This goes to the right, and this goes to the left, and reattach the ear tip, which is the best ear tip, which I like. Small ball. And this is how it looked like once worn. Okay. Once worn like this, the first immediate thing that you're gonna feel is that if you are not familiar with metal shell IEM, then you're gonna feel the weight, okay? But then again, of course, after a while, you're just gonna get used to it, because the good thing about this My Lin is that the design is very well designed ergonomically, so you can expect comfort. I do not feel any kind of edginess, any kind of fatigue, even using it for up to 3 hours earlier, so no issue at all. And this is very interesting, especially with the ear tip which I am using right now. It does seal really well for metal shell IEM, perhaps because of the chrome plating and also the contour of the IEM itself, which helps with the seal factor. So this thing will seal really well, so which also means that if I were to use this on a noisy environment, I do not need to crank my volume higher than normal. So that is definitely a very good thing. And I do not feel any kind of build-up pressure or any kind of underwater sensation. Hidizs My Lin is something which I would classify as being a mild V sound curve. So it emphasizes quite a bit on the lower frequency, slightly suppressed with the mid-range, and of course some boosting in the upper frequency, but it is still considered as mild. And when we talk about the technicalities, starting with the soundstage, it is kind of a bit circular, normal, not exactly very wide, not exactly narrow, but at least it is also tall sounding, and it is also fairly holographic with spatial imaging. So it is kind of a bit suitable as well if you plan to use this My Lin for gaming or even watching movies. And now let's talk about the mid-range. Now, as I noted there, there's a mild coloration throughout the entire mid-range, because this My Lin has been tuned to emphasize a bit more on female vocal, okay, especially this contralto type of female vocal, chesty type. So I am hearing the kind of coloration which adds a bit more of immersion and intimacy to the female vocal. And even when subjected listening to soprano type of vocal, which is high pitch, I do also hear a bit of coloration there, especially with the trailing edge of the crescendo of vocal from somebody like Alison Krauss. And pretty much almost neutral-ish when it comes to male vocal, especially when I listen to something like falsetto type, which is again high-pitched male vocal. But just make it like this. I believe the tuning intention for this My Lin is intentionally to focus a bit more on female vocal. And when it comes to the instrument itself, it is pretty much almost neutral-ish depending on what kind of recording, because if I subject it listening to instrumentation or percussion, then I might even say that it is actually accurate, neutral and uncolored. But when I listen to string instrument, then I do feel that the twang of guitars especially kind of a bit thicker than how it was supposed to be. Not exactly lifelike. But then again, the whole theme of the mid-range for this My Lin is that intended to be offering you something which is full-bodied. It has that kind of texture, it has that kind of definition, which is quite impressive. And I might even say that it is also technical, because it offers very good macro detail, it is very clean, and also very good micro detail. The attack is fast. And moving on to the upper frequency, it is sparkly, it is energetic, it is vibrant, yet it is non-offensive, because starting from the pinna region, I do not hear any kind of offensiveness from the upper mid-range going into the treble region, because usually if there's anything going to be sibilant sounding, then it will always start there. But this one is surprisingly very good. It has very good control when it comes to the upper mid-range to the treble region, and it will not be fatiguing or sibilant to people who are treble sensitive. And it extends fairly okay. It has the kind of airiness, it has the kind of this vibrancy and sparkle, which makes it kind of a bit slightly euphonic, which means that it is also fun sounding. And now moving on to the lower frequency, which is where I think the specialty of this My Lin. Remember the tuning nozzle which I mentioned to you earlier, the 3 type of tuning nozzle, which is high, lows and balance. Even when using balance and also especially the lows, it will focus a bit more on the lower frequency because this My Lin has been tuned to be kind of a bit specialized with the lower frequency on sub bass. So if you love thick, dense and rich sounding sub bass performance, My Lin totally have it. All you need to do is just put on the balance nozzle or even the bass nozzle and use narrow bore like this, then you're gonna feel the kind of punch from the mid bass, which is quite solid, quite fast, very clean, non-boomy at all, but it is very strong. And the way it actually disperses into the sub bass region, the presence, the dominance of the sub bass, you can't miss it, especially if you listen to electronic music or even if you listen to rock and metal music and even something like jazz music. But perhaps listening to jazz music, I feel that the bass can be kind of a bit overwhelming, kind of a bit too colored. But hey, the intention for this My Lin is definitely, at this point of time, the lower frequency especially is tuned to be used with those kind of exciting, vibrant, modern music. Pace, rhythm and timing, it is fairly fast. You have to remember, this My Lin still does offer balance amateur as part of the component. So you can expect My Lin being able to render or being able to handle complex composition, multi-layered, multi-instrument kind of presentation of sound, even at high BPM without appearing congested. And of course, coherency is really good. And when it comes to technicalities, good overall technicalities, non-overly analytical. For the price of under $100, My Lin can be considered as one of those very well-tuned, technically competent IEM. Because I am getting the kind of macro details, micro details even, resolution imaging, which is full-bodied. Okay, not exactly very analytical, but then again, if you get something which is analytical and combine it with something which is exciting, that can be fatiguing. But this one is just nicely tuned. Tonality and timbre, now you have to remember, My Lin also have balance amateur on top of the dynamic driver. The way it is being tuned, it is not exactly analog sounding as how I prefer it normally. I would even consider it as being modern, hi-fi kind of sound, euphonic kind of sound, tuned to be focusing a bit more on the excitement of the sound itself. It is vibrant, it is engaging, it is immersive by being fun and engaging sounding. Overall, after spending quite a bit of time using this My Lin, especially listening to modern music, pop music, electronic music, this is in fact a very well-tuned IEM. Putting aside the anime thing, putting aside the waifu thing, I am actually liking this quite a bit because it does deliver the kind of intended target for this My Lin, which is fun, engaging, vibrant, immersive, and at the same time, it is fairly good with technicalities and non-fatiguing at all. And last but not least, comparison. Of course, we love comparison. The first comparison that I'd like to draw is of course none other than Hidizs' very own metal shell IM, which was this MS2 Pro, which I reviewed sometime last year. In fact, MS2 Pro and this My Lin can be considered as a sibling, spiritual sibling, because they share similar mold of metal shell IM. It's just that this My Lin will offer a bit more of fanciful garnishing or finishing. The difference between those two is that MS2 Pro is a bit more linear, the blue sound curve, which hovers closer to neutral target and focus a bit more on mid bass rather than the sub bass, and it is a bit more less energetic and less euphonic sounding as compared to this My Lin, which totally makes sense because MS2 Pro is tuned to be more appealing to the wider audience, where this My Lin is definitely tuned for younger generation who prefer something which is a bit more exciting, immersive and fun. And another IEM which I can think of quite comparable to this My Lin, perhaps competing within the same kind of price point, is Juice Ear Defiant, which is very popular by the way. In fact, I might even say that the fiercest competition for this My Lin would be Juice Ear Defiant, because the way both of them renders a sound, presentation of sound is pretty much very similar. Fun, engaging sound with very good technicalities, very well balanced, very well tuned overall. In fact, if I were to say that, which one would you choose, most likely it will boil down to features, because both of them are pretty much on equal footing when it comes to sound.